to episode 91 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio in the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is ready to abandon hope on the Jets season, John Scott Sloat.
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know that I had hopes that they would make the playoffs
Okay.
or anything. But it's bad.
Yeah.
It's real bad.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a moment. But we have breaking news on our studio here.
Oh yeah. Do you want to?
I think you should do the honors.
Well, we got a new door.
Yes.
So the vault door itself is gone. The big metal contraption with
Yeah.
the actual combination lock on it is gone.
Yeah.
And we have a regular human door.
We do, and it has a little window in it.
Yeah, so people won't interrupt us anymore.
Yeah, though, can they actually see us from that window?
I think they can see me,
Okay.
or at least my back.
Okay. And we do have the new feature of the on-air light.
Yeah, that should
is-
help let people know that we're on air.
Theoretically should, yes.
Or we're on air. We're recording so that you can listen to this later at your leisure.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of your leisure, if in your leisure you would like to connect with the podcast, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. Just search for Various and Sundry Podcast and you will find it. And we did not have any new reviews this week. We did have one last week that you kind of trashed the listener who gave that review.
Yeah, we still don't know who it is.
We don't.
They haven't shown their face.
But I have to think that probably doesn't encourage others to go ahead and leave a review. But in any case, all right, John, let's give you a cathartic moment to work through what's going on with your beloved Jets, Jets.
Yeah, they can't protect their new quarterback. So I think Von Miller had 2.5 sacks in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Against the Jets, Zach Wilson threw 2 interceptions, but who can blame him when he's getting, I think they had like 10 quarterback hits and 4 sacks or something like that.
Yeah.
In the game, and that's just not a recipe for success. So
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. The defenses looked okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're just on the field too much.
Yeah.
So I think that's about all the update that I have in me. A lot of excuses being made right now, and they keep talking about the good practices they're having, but not the O-line apparently.
Apparently not. Yes. Well, speaking of rookie quarterbacks who aren't being protected, Justin Fields made his first NFL start, and
I think he had 1 completion in the first half.
It was ugly, and I'm not trying to absolve all of the responsibility from Justin Fields.
Sure.
But his offensive line was atrocious. I think the Browns it was like 9 or 10 sacks. And the number of times where Fields would take the snap and there was a free rusher, like a defensive lineman, not like a blitzing linebacker or a corner where you're like, well, that's by design. They leave that guy, Fields has to read that. Nope. Here comes Myles Garrett, unblocked, the best defensive lineman on the Browns. Let's leave him unblocked.
One of the best in the league.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it was open season on poor Justin Fields, and I'm not a Bears fan, but I do have see plenty of Bears fans on Twitter, and it felt like most of the blame fell on the offensive line and on the coach, Matt Nagy.
I hear they're calling for his head in Chicago.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a fair it did seem like, are you not capable of calling plays, one, that can actually protect your quarterback, but then 2, even when he did have time, receivers weren't open.
Yeah.
It's not like he was missing. There was maybe one play where he missed a guy that was open where you're like, I should have hit that. But every quarterback, even Tom Brady, if you went back and watched the film, every game's going to have 1 or 2 of those where it's like, oh, he actually missed an open guy there. It happens. But I think there's a growing unrest towards Matt Nagy almost wondering, like, is he either incapable of calling plays that fit Justin Fields' skill set, or is he intentionally, like, not calling plays, which that seems dumb. Like,
that seems
coaches
dumb.
want to win.
Yeah.
They don't keep their jobs if they don't win.
Well, and it seems to be his head on the chopping block right now, right? It's either the general manager, the coach, or the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. One of those three guys has their head on the chopping block. And in Chicago right now, it looks like Matt Nagy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's supposed to be an offensive genius.
I know, but they really don't have – they have Allen Robinson, who's a pretty good receiver, but not a like – he's not one of those guys you're like, he's one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL.
Sure.
He's not.
He's very good.
He's very good. Mm-hmm. But he's sort of one of those borderline, like, if he's your best receiver, I don't know how good your wide receiving core is.
Sure.
Now, if he was your 2 or your 3, you'd be like, we're pretty good here, I think.
Yeah.
So, in any case, big news made in the kicking game this weekend.
Yeah, Justin Tucker hit was it 66?
66.
To win it.
Yes, so that set an NFL record, breaking the hearts of Lions fans. Did you see the screen capture of when the ball goes through the uprights, and you see all of the Detroit fans behind there doing the surrender cobra?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, he hit that thing, and it hit the crossbar and bounced up pretty high in the air and went over.
And just trickled over.
Yeah. Yeah, so an NFL record 66-yard field goal.
And I think the previous was 63. Is that right?
It might have been longer than that.
Because I remember Jason Elam had one that was 63 in Denver.
Right. High altitude.
High altitude,
So you kind of look at that and go, well, does that add a yard or two maybe? But 66 in Detroit.
Yeah.
Not exactly high altitude in Detroit.
Maybe the opposite of high altitude.
So that was impressive. Yeah, Justin Tucker's he's a beast.
Yeah.
When it comes to the present-day kickers. I mean, he's
very,
one of
very good.
I think you can make the case he's one of the best kickers
I think
in league
fair.
history.
Yes.
Top 10 probably at least.
At least probably top 5. Yeah. He's very, very good.
And then the other sort of fluke play of the weekend for NFL was the Jags-Cardinals game, where the kicker for the Cardinals at the end of the first half attempted a 68-yard field goal that a Jags player caught 9 yards deep in the end zone and ran back for a touchdown.
Yeah, 109 yards.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is by definition the longest play in NFL history. There's been like 2 others, I think.
Yep.
I think one was an interception return and one might be a kickoff return.
Yep. So, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting weekend of football.
Unusual sorts of events like that. But we should probably move on to the college ranks, yeah?
Yeah. Let's do it. How did the Buckeyes do this weekend?
They took care of business after a very slow start. They won 59-7 over an absolutely atrocious Akron team.
How close was the score other than 0-0 or 7-0? Did it
so
ever
Akron
get close?
Scored first.
Did they really?
They did.
Oh,
they
my
did.
gosh.
And with like –
oh, my.
I mean, with like 2 minutes left in the first quarter, the score was 7-7. Then Ohio State scored, and then I think they scored the halftime score was 38-7. So they had a big second quarter.
Any defensive touchdowns for the Bucs?
Yes. It was a pick 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Defense?
They looked better, but it's Akron.
Yeah.
They're terrible. I mean, they're terrible. So I don't know. I mean, it did look like they were actually lined up in the places where they were supposed to be. But, it's Akron.
Yeah.
So I don't want to read too much into that. And they played with – Ohio State played without their starting quarterback. They're resting him because of a shoulder injury. Like, he could have gone, but it was smart to rest him.
But isn't their backup a 5-star?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, Kyle McCord, who his first series was epically bad.
Get the jitters out,
There were some serious jitters, though. I mean, I think his first pass was way overthrown.
Okay.
Then his second pass actually was it was supposed to be a wide receiver bubble screen kind of thing. He threw it backwards, so that goes down as a fumble, lost like 6 yards. Thankfully, it went out of bounds.
Okay.
And then he got sacked on third and whatever. So
not a good first series.
No, he did rally, though. But even his numbers are a little deceptive because he threw for over 300 yards. But I'd be curious to go back. Of that 300-plus yards, I'd imagine that maybe no more than 100 of it was like actual yardage in the air, and the other 200-plus was guys catching a pass 8 yards downfield and then running for another 40.
Okay.
So, sometimes those big numbers can be a little deceptive where you're like, wow, he threw for 300 yards. Well, he threw it to great playmakers 5 yards down the field, and they ran for 40. Like there was one pass that went for 85 yards, and I think it was a 7-yard out or something like that the receiver made a move and then just took off.
Yeah.
So they play Rutgers next week, who gave Michigan a bit of a test, but ultimately fell short. Bigger news, Clemson lost.
To NC State.
NC State in overtime. They're hanging on by a thread to the top 25. And Oklahoma barely survived West Virginia. Unranked West Virginia. Beat them by 3 at home on a field goal as time expired. 16-13. So they're not exactly lighting it up either.
That's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, Oklahoma is in trouble. And then Notre Dame. Now here's where I'm going to upset some of our fan base here because
you're going to upset one person.
Maybe. The final score against Wisconsin was, I think, 41-13. Still couldn't go. It was a blowout, right?
It's a pretty good route. Yeah.
That would be a little misleading because that was a one-score game well into the fourth quarter. Then Notre Dame scored, and then to go up 2 scores. So the game's still in play a little bit, not dangerous, but in play. The Wisconsin quarterback throws 2 bad pick sixes on almost back-to-back plays. So it goes from a 2-score game to a 4-score game in 30 seconds. So
not as close as
yeah. And they play. I think it's Cincinnati is they play Cincinnati this upcoming week, and I think Cincinnati's a better team.
Better than Wisconsin.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see about that. And yeah, I think that's about it on college football. Is the baseball season over? I've lost track. It's got to be close, right?
Yeah, we got a couple series. The Mets have a couple series left. One at I want to say, well, I think Atlanta's in town for the last series.
Now I know I'm asking a risky question to you. Are they mathematically eliminated?
Yeah, it's been a few days. They've been mathematically
it's
eliminated.
Good that we're not relying on you to actually figure out. You just have to go look up, are they mathematically eliminated?
Yeah, they're gone. They're gone. Yeah. I think there's 4 or 5 games left in the season. There's not many left. I think this is the last week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're donezo.
Okay. All right.
So, and heads are rolling. That's kind of the
time to clean house a little bit.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
spend the money.
Yeah. Use it up, man.
And they got plenty of it, apparently.
Yeah, the owner's a multi-billionaire, yes?
Yes. He's a shady hedge fund manager.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. It was between him and A-Rod was the ethical choice.
Indeed. Oh, gosh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, we are continuing today our series on the parables. We kind of introduced last week. What are the parables? What should we keep in mind as we read them, interpret them, etc.? This week, we're going to do our discussion on the parable of the sower and the soils. This is a parable that occurs in all 3 of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
And we're working through Mark's today,
right?
We're
just going to go with Mark. Matthew and Mark's accounts are very similar. Luke's is a little shorter, but there's no substantial difference in terms of meaning. So just for the sake of convenience, we're going to read through Mark. So you want to light us up here and read through it? You want to split it? I mean, it's 20 verses. I don't know.
I can handle 20 verses, I think. We'll see. But Mark chapter 4.
Mark chapter 4, yeah.
Okay. So let's get started. Mark chapter 4, verse 1. Again, he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered around him. So that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea, and the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. And he was teaching them many things in parables, and in his teaching he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some of the seed fell along the path. And the birds came and devoured it. Other seed fell on the rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched. And since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seed fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And when he was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parables. And he said to them, To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything is in parables, so that they may indeed see, but not perceive, and they may indeed hear, but not understand, lest they should turn and be forgiven. And he said to them, Do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all of the parables? The sower sows the word. And these are the ones along the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on rocky ground, the ones who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy, and they have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. And then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are the ones sown among the thorns, and they are those who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of the riches and the desires for other things enter in and choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. But those that were sown on the good soil are the ones who hear the word and accept it and bear fruit, 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Okay, so let's just kind of start with big picture observations from the parable. I think context is always a good thing to pay attention to when it comes to the parables, and in all three of the synoptic gospels, it seems like this parable comes on the heels of growing opposition to Jesus and his ministry. So I think that in some ways kind of sets a little bit of the framework for why is Jesus telling this parable. I think part of why he's telling it is to help us understand the varying responses to his ministry. Why isn't everyone just like really excited and fully embracing what Jesus is saying?
Was there the expectation then that the Messiah's ministry would be widely accepted throughout certainly Israel?
I think there was the pretty wide expectation that it would be easy to recognize the Messiah, and that people would recognize him and fall in line with him. But of course, Jesus isn't doing the kinds of things that the average Israelite was expecting as a sort of telltale. Like he showed no interest in the sort of military and political aspects of any sort of messianic ministry. And I think that confused people. as well as even just his interaction with some of the religious leaders. The religious leaders, as they see Jesus doing things, he's doing things that don't fit with their paradigms and their expectations. And that also is like, well, how can this guy be the Messiah? Like, he's not – he doesn't listen to us. He doesn't follow our sort of extended traditions about the Mosaic law and Sabbath and food laws and all that kind of stuff. Like, how can this be the guy?
So it seems to be that this is paradigmatic for our own ministries, right? That I mean, if I can make a big picture observation, that when we preach the gospel, this is kind of what happens, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's absolutely the case. And I think this Jesus himself signals the importance of this parable when this is in Mark chapter 4, verse 13. He says, "Do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all the parables?" That seems to be an indication that this parable is paradigmatic. It's this is the key. You have to get this one before you understand the rest of them, which I also think helps explain why Jesus goes out of his way to give detailed correspondences. Where in some of the other in most of the other parables, he does not go out of his way to give every little like, oh, this represents the Father. This represents like
sure.
Here,
in most of them, he doesn't.
Most of them, he doesn't give that kind
details.
of detail. Yeah. But here he does. He gives very clear explanations of this kind of seed that falls in this soil represents this. So I think that further illuminates the importance of this parable. It's as if Jesus is saying, I'm not going to leave this one to chance here. I'm going to make it clear. So I also think that one of the there's a lot of pieces in this puzzle of this parable, but wouldn't you say that probably the most unusual, or maybe even just the most not controversial, but maybe controversial piece of it is Jesus' explanation for why he teaches in parables? Wouldn't you say that's probably the most?
Yes, I think that's probably the most controversial. Even reading it, I was like, that feels different.
Yeah, and in particular, again, when you look at that's verse 11. To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything is in parables, so that, and then there's sort of a paraphrase of Isaiah 6, verses 9 and 10. They may indeed see but not perceive, and may indeed hear but not understand, lest they should turn and be forgiven. So you could read that and go, so wait a minute. Jesus is intentionally hiding the message of the kingdom so that people don't repent.
Right. That seems to be the surface reading.
That would seem to be a quick glance like, is he really saying that? And I would suggest the answer is, actually, no, he's not saying that.
Well, then what is he saying, Matt?
So I think part of it is rooted in the allusion to Isaiah 6. Most people are probably familiar with Isaiah 6 for the first part of the chapter. It's the classic Isaiah has a vision of God in his throne room.
Sure.
Woe is me.
Here's the coal.
Yep. He's cleansed. And then God says, who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here am I, send me. And it's as if most people just kind of end the chapter there.
That's heartwarming.
Yeah, it's like, yes, Isaiah, such a model of missionary zeal. Like, I will go for the Lord.
Yeah.
And then we stop there and we don't read the rest of the chapter, because the rest of the chapter, verses 9 and 10 included, which is what Jesus quotes here essentially, is God saying, okay, so I'm going to send you out and you're going to see very little fruit in your ministry. And actually, I am going to use your words to harden people in their rebellion. Yeah. And therefore, on Judgment Day, when I condemn them, there will be no doubt that they had no excuse. we don't typically read that part of it. I'm guessing, even yesterday in church, we kind of commissioned a couple going off to the mission field.
Yeah.
And we didn't read Isaiah 6, But can you imagine if
that's not a typical missionary send-off passage,
right? But can you imagine if we'd said, "We're so thrilled you're going. Now, we believe that when you're going off, you're going to see almost no fruit, and God is going to use your ministry primarily so that there is no excuse on Judgment Day when people say, so that people cannot say, we never heard the good news. That's the primary purpose of what you're going to do." That's not the most chipper send-off kind of message.
Yeah. No, they don't tell you that when you walk into seminary. That's not that's not the first that's not the first word. Yeah.
No. So back to the passage here though. What is Jesus doing? I think what Jesus is indicating is that parables are more like thermostats than they are thermometers.
Okay.
Here's what I mean by that.
Yes. Please explain your illustration. I understand the difference between those two things.
Right. So a thermostat, you have that in your house.
Sure.
You determine the temperature in your house. If you want it to be 68 degrees, you set it to 68. Furnace kicks in, and it does its work.
Sure.
And if you have a good furnace, that gets you to 68. Okay. A thermometer only reveals what the temperature is. Mm-hmm. So when you're feeling a little bit feverish, you put the thermometer in your mouth, and it tells you your temperature is 101.6. Oh, okay. The thermometer doesn't cause the temperature. It just reveals what it is.
Yeah.
That's what parables are like. Parables reveal the condition of a person's heart as it stands. So that if people are receptive to the gospel message, they show interest, they hear it, they have ears to hear, and then they listen and they believe and they produce fruit. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, if they are hardened soil, they don't hear, they don't respond, they don't believe. So the parable itself is not causing the message to be not heard or not understood.
It's not a thermostat.
Exactly. It's a thermometer. Mm-hmm. It's revealing the pre-existing temperature, the spiritual temperature, the condition of the soil of that person.
Interesting.
So I think that's a somewhat simplified version. Yeah. That's the punchline of what I think Jesus is saying here.
Yeah. No, that's good.
So another piece that I think people can kind of get worked up over is what do we make of these different kinds of soils? Meaning, oftentimes this is kind of a theological question, which I'll preface by saying the point of the parable is not to answer this question.
Sure.
Some people are like, so are any of these people actually converted before? Obviously the last person, the seed that falls on the good soil and produces 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Obviously that person has been genuinely converted. But for example, what about the soil before that, right? The one who it's sown among thorns, they hear the word, the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches and desires for other things enter in, choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Mm-hmm. That's often the one that people are like, well, does that mean that person is converted and just unfruitful? Or are they not actually converted because they don't bear fruit? What do you think?
I think I would be, anytime anybody goes like, well, what do you think of so-and-so? Are they a Christian? I was like, that's not really for me to determine. I'm not sure that I have a role in making that determination whatsoever, I think the optimist in me wants to go, I hope so. Is that a fair response, or do you see that so. as weak? Am I weak, Matt?
Well, I think it's fair to say I hope so, but here's the
let me put it this way. I don't have any assurance. How's that?
Yes. I would be I think that is the wisest pastoral answer, is to say, I'm not sure but I certainly wouldn't want to be in that spot.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to someone who thinks they're in that spot, I would want to push much further in terms of the, do you genuinely believe in Christ? Is there maybe fruit in your life that you don't recognize, or can other people observe and say, yeah, they may have questions about their salvation, but I've seen God at work in their lives, and I have good confidence that that's fruit. But I would certainly not want to give any measure of assurance to a person in that spot who there's no evidence of fruit. Then I'd want, especially over extended period of time.
Sure. There's always seasons of fruitlessness or struggle, but you're right. Over time, you want to see
exactly.
You want to see fruit.
Exactly, and I think sometimes people can ask that question, and it can be a bit of a smokescreen or just a detour to the point that Jesus is making is that the way to respond to the message of the kingdom is to receive it, believe it, and then to produce fruit. Mm-hmm. And if that's not happening, then there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. So I think that's how I'd want to probably handle that kind of question there. It's okay to say, I don't think the parable intends to answer that question. Mm-hmm. That's how I'd start any answer to that kind of question, to say, let's just be clear. I don't think the parable is trying to answer that question. Now, if we want to try to extrapolate from other texts and put together some sort of answer, that's fine, as long as we're clear that Jesus isn't telling the parable to explain, is that third category of soil, are they actually converted or not?
Yeah.
That's not why he's telling the parable.
And he's telling correct me if I'm wrong, he's telling that example is like, this is not ideal.
Yeah.
This is not what we want to shoot for.
Correct.
This is not the goal.
Correct. Another facet of this parable that I think is not as often talked about is that, and I'm not sure entirely what to do with this piece of the parable. In the Old Testament, there were a number of prophetic passages that use the language of sowing to refer to God sowing his people into the land as an image of restoration from exile. So I think there could be some of that element here. Now, someone like N.T. Wright goes way too far with this and basically says, well, that's what the parable is about. It's about this is restoration from exile. This is Israel being restored from exile, which in his mind is what every parable is about at some level. So, but I do think based on some of the language from the Old Testament, how often God says, I will sow them back into the land. It does make me wonder if there's some element of that here in this parable.
Some allusion or –
Yeah, that there is a sense in which that is true, that this is what God is doing. This is what God is doing, but that's not the focus of what he's – like this is an individual call to hear the message. Let the one who has ears to hear, let him hear. It's not – Jesus is not just saying, yep, restoration from exile is here, everybody. God's sowing people back into the land. That's more of that's a larger theological explanation, but it's not the point of what Jesus is getting at. He's saying, let the one who has ears to hear, let him hear. Be that kind of soil that hears the word, receives it, believes it, and produces fruit. So I think that's what's going on there.
Maybe just one more point. What do you make of the extended description of his teaching, of like how he's teaching? Like they
at the beginning of chapter 4?
Yeah, they spend Mark spends two full verses there, and verse 1's quite long, about the location of his teaching, like climbing into a boat, having people on the shores, and teaching out. What do you make of that? Any significance there, other than Jesus was, this is just what happened?
I think that it is part of, and that if I remember correctly, that specific extensive description is unique to Mark's version of it. So I think Mark is highlighting the growing reach and scope of Jesus' ministry. And if you look the previous passage is very interesting because in Mark's gospel, the story right before this is of Jesus' mother and brothers trying to get an audience with Jesus and him basically saying, you know who my mother and brothers are? It's the one who hears the word of God or does the will of God. That's my mother and my sister and my brother. So I think that it is showing the growing popularity of Jesus and how his ministry is taking off, and it is causing division, even in his family, that there's this – because you don't necessarily see why they want to get to talk to him, but other accounts suggest perhaps that they think he might have lost his mind. And so it's you're seeing this division that the kingdom is producing. The kingdom is broken in Jesus, and now you're seeing how do we account for these different responses? Even from Jesus' own family, there's this what do we make of this? He's gone a little nuts. Maybe we need to rein him in a little bit. So, and of course, knowing historically that none of his brothers appear to have been followers of his until either late in his earthly ministry or after his resurrection. There's some debate about that. So, in any case, anything else you want to highlight on this?
I think that was it.
Yeah, I think this is one of those parables where it's always good to sort of reflect on as we think about communicating the gospel. I mean, obviously the point is about Jesus preaching the gospel, but how does Jesus do that today? He does that through his people.
Yeah.
So even as we communicate the gospel, we should expect these varying kinds of responses, and we should also pray for God to prepare the soil so that the soil of the person's heart and life that the seed of his word is falling on is receptive. And so prayer, I think, plays an important role in that as well.
Nothing worse than hard clay soil.
Spoken like a man trying to grow grass.
Nothing worse.
Yes, indeed. Well, we are on episode 91. So, John, we need an athlete. What do you got?
Yeah, number 91, Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
Famous Dennis Rodman, wild Dennis Rodman.
Have you seen the there was a big piece of it in the Last Dance, the ESPN 30 for 30 series they did, where maybe there's even a whole episode in there on just the craziness of Dennis Rodman.
There was certainly an extended section of one of the episodes, for sure.
Yeah. So he wore 91, I believe, with the Bulls.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What an aggressive number for a basketball player to wear.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I could have done a little bit more research as to why he chose 91. If anybody knows, who knows?
Yeah. And we do have an issue with Dennis Rodman.
Yeah. We've picked him already. For number 73.
Also another great number for a basketball player.
That was with the Lakers, wasn't it?
I have no idea.
I think that was his number with the Lakers.
But, he had more than one hair color, so I suppose we could pick – anyway, we're probably not going to pick him. Kevin Green.
Yes.
Played defensive end
for
the Panthers and the Steelers.
And the Steelers mostly, yep.
And, Packers, Rams.
Yeah, but he was mostly known for his time with the Steelers, I think. Pretty dominant defensive end, probably just a little bit before your time when it comes to
before my
full awareness of NFL football.
Yeah. I think my first NFL season that I remember watching was the Jets going to the AFC Championship game in '98.
Okay.
So that's probably the first one I really remember. And we lost to John Elway.
There you go.
And the Broncos.
Okay.
Sergei Fedorov, good American name there.
Yes. Again, another one of these hockey players that you're like, how does he play? How do they play that long?
Yeah. When I was young, I watched a lot of hockey, and Fedorov was a good player. Sergei.
Yeah. Though, again, me not being a hockey person, I'm hard pressed to evaluate that. So.
Yeah. The Red Wings were a very good team
I do
through the
remember
90s
them
and
being
the 2000s. Yeah.
good in the 90s, yes.
Yeah. They're a very, very good team.
Weren't they in the Colorado Avalanche?
Oh, yeah. Them and the Colorado
Kind of a
Avalanche
big
would
rivalry
go
back
at
and
it
forth,
with
yeah.
Patrick Roy.
Yeah, spelled Roy, R-O-Y.
Patrick Roy.
Yeah. Hockey's got plenty of those names. Like there was, what is it, Satan?
Yes.
Satan,
Yes.
whose last name was spelled Satan, S-A-T-A-N.
Yes.
So it just looks weird to have on the back of a jersey. Oh, there's
Yes.
Satan. Yes.
My favorite named hockey player, I don't know if I ever brought this up before on the pod, but he was a defenseman for the New York Rangers back in the day. And he was just a behemoth of a man, like 6'4", 260. I mean, just a big guy. His last name for a defenseman, Buka Boom.
That's good. That's good.
Buka Boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Ryan Kerrigan.
Yes.
Current?
Apparently he is still in the league with the Eagles now, I guess.
He had a 4 or 5 year run there where he was quite dominant.
Yes. Yes. For the Redskins.
For the Redskins, yes.
Yeah, I think
for the Washington football team.
Yes. Well, at the time they were the Redskins. So, yes. And there's an interesting connection
Yeah.
to Ryan Kerrigan. Would you care to explain that?
Yeah, his little sister played volleyball at Grace.
Yeah.
Back in, 5 years ago maybe?
Yeah. Mid-20-teens kind of thing.
Yeah. And he was I think on campus
He was on
once
campus
or
a few
twice.
times. Yeah. Here to watch his sister.
Yeah, to watch his sister. And I think he was here for graduation, obviously.
Yeah.
May, not much going on in football.
Yeah, I think they're from Muncie maybe. So they're from Indiana.
Was he a Ball State guy or Purdue?
He played at Purdue.
Okay.
I think he's from Muncie though. So, so it's not crazy that his sister ended up here.
Yeah.
It's not like he grew up in Montana and you're like, how did she end up there?
Yeah.
So. And then our Ohio State athlete for the week is Drew Chrisman, who was the punter until just this past year. An excellent punter. He signed a free agent contract with the Bengals in the NFL. Punters don't really get drafted. Punters and kickers don't get drafted.
Yeah, every now and then you see one go in
On
the draft
rare
and you
occasion.
go like, what on earth is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels like those are kind of a dime a dozen. You can pick up a kicker or a punter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, John. So we've eliminated Dennis Rodman because we've already selected him.
Yep.
So that leaves Kevin Green, Sergei Fedorov, or Ryan Kerrigan.
I'm probably between Sergei Fedorov and Ryan Kerrigan, truthfully speaking.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ryan Kerrigan for the Grace connection.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can call us homers. That's fine. It's free entertainment. If you don't like it, you're not out any money. So, okay. One thing you like, John.
So Andrea and I got 4.5 yards of peat moss delivered to our house on Friday.
Okay.
And I bought a tow-behind, basically spreader, and the peat moss did not fit through the spreader.
Uh-oh.
And so Andrea and I were out there at 5 o'clock on Friday night spreading it by wheelbarrow, shovel, and rake. And a couple of neighbors came out and helped us out, and we got rid of most of the pile by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So my neighbors came through for me big time.
Okay. So I'm going to ask this question first. Do any of your neighbors listen to the podcast?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Because when I saw the show notes and I saw that under your one thing we liked, you had neighbors. That came right after we had a conversation where you mentioned coming home from a walk with your lovely wife a few nights ago and being greeted by the aroma of some
illegal
cannabis.
Yeah, some illegal plant burning.
Yeah. So it made me wonder, not having heard this part of the story, after hearing we came home and one of our neighbors seemed to have been enjoying.
Well, I don't know that. It could have been the people behind us. It could have
still a neighbor.
Yeah, I suppose so.
We don't know which neighbor.
I have no idea which neighbor.
Okay.
If it was a neighbor, it could have been that. I don't know. It could have been anybody.
Okay. Just struck me as amusing that.
Yeah. That'd be the one thing I like.
Yeah. It's great to come home to the smell of weed. It's just some other conversations would take place at that point probably. For me, yesterday, since we're recording on a Monday afternoon, we had what has become now an annual tradition.
Second annual, yeah.
Yeah. Food Truck Sunday at our church.
Mm-hmm.
So we had our worship service outside in the sort of the backyard area. And then after that, we had 4 local food trucks come in, and everyone present got a ticket for a meal from one of the food trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were also 2 dessert trucks that you got a ticket for as well. So
great way to help a small local business.
Yes.
And a way to make your people happy, because who doesn't love a good food truck?
I know. Which one did you have?
I went to the quesadilla one.
Okay.
And got Southern pulled pork quesadilla.
Yeah. How was that?
And dipped it in barbecue sauce. It was divine.
Okay.
Now I will say the bees loved it as well.
Yeah, that was one of the few drawbacks of yesterday.
And did I tell you this? I had a bee land in my barbecue sauce.
No.
And then it turned over in my barbecue sauce, and its wings got stuck in the barbecue sauce. I had to flick it out of my barbecue sauce.
Yeah.
And stomp on it on the ground. But I think it was I put it out of its misery, really. I don't think there's any recovering from that for a bee.
No. Because you would think other bees would just come and probably try to take the sauce off of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I had the bison burger.
How was that?
It was good. Very flavorful. So I very much enjoyed that. And I like this. Before this, we used to do a big church picnic, kind of like a potluck, where people would the church would provide the meat, burgers and hot dogs and stuff, and then people would bring side dishes and chips and desserts. I think this is better.
I think so too. Yeah.
I think this is better.
Less organizing, cleanup, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good. So that was my one thing I liked this week: Food Truck Sunday.
Yeah. They've also moved it a little back in the calendar as well, because if you remember, the church picnic would always land on the first Sunday of NFL football.
Yes.
Every year. And I'd be there for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I got to go.
Well, I remember even before that was moved back. They used to do it like mid-August.
Ooh.
And there were some sweltering days.
Ooh, that's hot. So,
the sort of 3rd to 4th week of September is, I think, a sweet spot typically of the weather.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right.
So shout out to our pastoral staff for giving direction to that and all those involved in bringing that together. So we've talked how bad the Jets are.
Yeah.
We've talked that we really don't know if the Buckeyes have actually improved because they played a terrible opponent. We've talked about being the kind of soil that hears the word of God, has ears to hear. We've talked various athletes, including Ryan Kerrigan, whose sister attended here at Grace College and played volleyball.
I think married a guy named Sam.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just reaching into the recesses of my brain here, trying to pull things out.
Yeah, okay. And then, of course, we've talked about John's neighbors from a couple of different perspectives.
A few different perspectives, yeah.
So I think by definition we've covered our various and sundry topics, and it's time to call mission accomplished.
I think so.
So until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.